When classic mobile phones started getting their own games, most of the time it would be a game based off a movie that recently came out at the time, or just a port of an already existing game. But when it came to these Java mobile games, there was a very limited amount of space that developers of these games could work with, so most of the time you'd get a short and mediocre game. We've seen most of the Java mobile games that were based on Resident Evil in a separate video, and I'd like to do the same for the mobile Terminator games. So we're going to be reviewing these 3 Terminator games: the Terminator I'm Back, Terminator Revenge, and Terminator Salvation. There's also one on Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines, but it's not worth counting as it's just one of those puzzle games where you have to rearrange the pieces. It's weird because I could have sworn that there was a Terminator 3 mobile game that offered some gameplay like the others, but I couldn't find anything other than the puzzle game. So maybe I was getting it confused with the Game Boy Advance version of Terminator 3? But anyways, let's check these Terminator mobile games out. And by the way, these games don't include background music for each level, so I'll include the music that best fits the style of the games. Let's take a look at the Terminator I'm Back. This game came out in 2005 and it was developed by Infuso or Infuso. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. But anyways, this game is like a prequel to the first film. You play as Kyle Reese taking orders from John Connor with a brief description for each mission as you progress. I like when mobile games do this. We had something similar with the Resident Evil 3 The Missions mobile game, as you might remember. Now, one thing I like about the story in this game is that the ending ties in very well with the first film. In the final missions, you recover some data information about Skynet creating a time machine. This is when you, as Kyle Reese, are sent in to try and destroy the machine before they make their next move. And in the end, Kyle Reese has to jump into the time machine to prevent the Terminator from killing Sarah Connor in the past. In the film, Kyle mentions that he volunteered to go through with the mission, but I think this story could still be connected with that. It doesn't have to be official, but I'm just glad that it tried something new rather than just recreating scenes from one of the films. The sound effects are alright. There aren't many, but the sounds do sound alarming, which kind of fits with the tone of the machine war, I guess. The gameplay is a bit tanky, which can become a problem since most enemies can fire at you the moment you step into their view, but I managed to get through the game in under an hour. Even with the touchscreen controls, the graphics are not bad. I love pixel art, so to me I think this works just fine. Although I wish the inventory menu wasn't taking up half the screen. It doesn't make sense because you already have an option to open the inventory menu with a button command. That didn't make sense to me. I would have liked it if you had the option to make it appear that way or just hide it. Another thing I didn't like was the rocket launcher. It shoots rockets directly on your position if you aim straight ahead. I don't understand why. I tried triggering it as it fell, but that only shot out more rockets. I aimed to the left and it dropped slightly to the right of my character. Basically every direction you face ends up shooting the rockets right next to you or on top of you. So the only way I found it useful sometimes was when I had to take down a machine turret. But that only worked sometimes. There are only 12 missions. The 7th mission is very difficult if you don't have the plasma rifle or any other weapon besides the default weapon you carry.
Oh crap. Game over, man. Game over.
It gets tricky in some parts, but overall, I did enjoy it. Mainly because of the pixel art charm it has, since every mission is slightly different from one another. And as you get to the end, it really does look like you're inside enemy territory. I'd give this mobile game a 5 out of 10. Why? Because you might not want to play through it again once you complete it. It looks neat, but for me, I didn't feel like playing it again anytime soon. The gameplay is, well, let's face it, boring. However, it is a good thing that the game is short because I like going back to play old school games that can be completed in under an hour. So here I get to enjoy a game that doesn't take up a lot of my time. I get a little nostalgia out of it, a little bit of entertainment, and since it's boring, at least you don't really have to play for that long. But then after you complete it, you just move on to another game or so. Now let's look at Terminator Revenge. It was developed by Infuso, if that's how you say it again, like the previous game, and it was released in 2006. This one has a good premise to it. You play as the T-800 that's been programmed to terminate a resistance scientist who was sent back through time to discover every weakness to Skynet's Terminators by experimenting on the remains of the T-800 from the first Terminator film. So it's like a what-if story that takes place in between parts 1 and 2. There are a lot of Terminator stories that take place in between the first and second films, so the least we can expect is somewhat of a unique story. I like that you get to play as the bad guys here instead. It's rare to play as the antagonists when it comes to Terminator games, so that's neat. Getting to play as the opposing T-800 that mows down any human resistance that gets in its way. So the story is quite creative. I like that you can break through walls, even through weak floors with a ground punch, and if you crouch, the Terminator will block bullets which surprisingly deal no damage when doing so. And you can shoot while doing this, so it becomes very useful. Most early Terminator games never really made you feel like you were a legit Terminator since you could easily get taken down. But here, I think they pulled it off nicely. One thing I gotta mention is that jumping high enough to hit the ceiling won't stop you from reaching other platforms. It might not seem like a big deal, but I wish a lot of old school games allowed this, even if it doesn't make sense. The graphics are good for the hardware it's on, and even the main menu has that Terminator vibe to it. Now, the two awesome things I really liked about the game, even when they got difficult over time, was when you're hacking through devices to open doors, and when you're trying to revive the Terminator. The hacking feature is similar to how young John Connor hacked devices like that ATM in Terminator 2. And when the Terminator gets taken down, you have a chance to repair its damage by pressing the right commands that appear all in a limited time. It gets tougher the more times you get taken down, of course, and the hacking device adds extra digits the more you progress, but it works fine. However, the game lacks any sort of sound. They only had one track for the game, which was one thing that a lot of Java mobile games did. It's only heard on the main menu, but everything else, including sound effects, are absent. Sound effects for each weapon are the least we could get, but they did not include them here. So the entire game, excluding the main menu, is completely silent, which is absurd seeing as the game will immediately ask you if you want the sound to be turned on. Almost like if the main menu wasn't meant to be the only thing featuring sound. Now, to rate this game, I'd give it a 6 out of 10 for a mobile game. Like the previous one, I don't really feel like going back to play this game. It's too quiet, repetitive as well, and only worth beating once. It doesn't offer much. So those two Terminator games were a prime example of your average Java mobile phone game. But the last one to look at here is the most impressive of them all. In fact, it truly uses every bit of its hardware's capabilities to the point that you won't believe it's literally a Java mobile phone game. Let's look at Terminator Salvation, the mobile phone game. Released in 2009, the developers at Gameloft took the concept of the movie and made it an even better experience than the movie itself. This is one of the most impressive Java mobile games I've ever played. The memory space for these mobile games went as low as half a megabyte. Or actually, not even that. Most of them were like 1/4 of a megabyte. The Terminator Salvation mobile game size is only 263 kilobytes. That reminds me, NES games had a similar memory space. In fact, the NES Terminator 1 game was 266 kilobytes, which means that the Terminator Salvation mobile game is 3 kilobytes less than the NES Terminator game, and look at the differences between them. This is incredible. How do you make 3D environments with only 263 kilobytes? How do you include all these gameplay elements with cutscenes, sound effects, difficulty options, puzzles, and multiple sprites at once, all in only 263 kilobytes? Amazing job! These developers were passionate as hell just to come up with this. Now, these levels don't include music in them. There are some short tracks that play in between levels, but you know what? I'm okay with these Java games not able to include music in every level, because that means that it leaves me in charge of choosing the music. Playing through each of these obstacles was so much fun. It felt like a refreshing experience when you aren't just shooting buttloads of endoskeleton Terminators the entire time. I've seen some Terminator games try this so that the experience doesn't fall flat, but it doesn't really feel exciting like it does here. It's so cool to go from shooting Terminators on foot to hacking and flying an HK aerial, then trying to avoid crashing while shooting enemies. That followed up by more obstacles that changed the gameplay experience. You get to play as John Connor and Marcus Wright. My favorite mission would have to be the one where you're riding that motorcycle with John Connor like he did in the movie. Only here it's incredibly fun. Especially if you do what I did and blast that Guns N' Roses song from Terminator 2 while completing the game.
Ah! Oh no! Man, it's quick thinking with this. That's amazing! Oh, damn it! Woohoo! How did they get this frame rate over here? Look at this. Everything's fast. Amazing. Amazing. Oh, I just barely got to the corner. Oh boy. Oh no. Can I go under? Oh, I could. Yes. Wait, give me extra speed? That's not good. Everything's already super fast. Oh, yes. Oh, careful. Oh boy. And mines on the floor. Watch out with those mines. Get those rockets. Not that we even have time for rockets. Oh boy.
I know I said earlier that I liked the Terminator I'm Back game because it gave us a new story rather than retelling the events from a movie, but this game is based on Terminator Salvation, so they had to recreate parts of the movie into its gameplay, but what they did here was fantastic. They pulled it off nicely in a very entertaining way. It reminds me of the Mummy Returns game on Game Boy Color. The developers, they did such a great job giving us so many different gameplay elements, and it was amazing to see that all in a Game Boy Color game. Imagine if phone games today were like this, just taking the same concept, which is about giving the players a fun experience with a game based off a movie, instead of making you grind for years trying to beat a game without spending any of your money. I mean, I know games are free now and those developers make money off of in-game currency and such, but I miss the days when you just bought a game on your phone and you don't have to worry about grinding to beat the game. Just have fun with it since you paid for the game. If it's short, well, so was the price. Can't complain when phone games would only cost about $4 or $5. But anyways, those were the Terminator Java mobile games. I initially wanted to only review the Terminator Salvation game as it was the most entertaining of all of them. Of all 3 or 4 if you count that puzzle one. But the others on this list were still worth checking out, and I wanted you guys to see what they were like. So with that said, that's it for the video. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, as apparently now it doesn't even matter if you hit the notification button. The like button is the only thing YouTube is permitting us to use as a way to send more traffic to that video. If you're a Patreon supporter, check out the exclusive videos on my Patreon. Go support the channel, which is only $1. Sacrifice that McChicken for extra quality content, my friend. But anyways, I'll see you all in the next video, and remember to have an awesome day.